Watching Right Stuff live on 5 with special guest Todd Carty. He's just directed his first movie. First movie, Perfect Burger. Keep an eye out for that. And we've got Carol Thatcher and Stephen Gates along too. But first, is the BBC too powerful, as rival broadcasters and critics have claimed? Guaranteed income of £3.6 billion a year, coming from a £142.50 licence fee, funds 30,000 staff, thousands more freelancers, 9 TV channels in this country, 59 radio stations, and a huge range of online services. I said that's just what you get in this country. What's more, the Beaver's expanded it into other areas. It's bought up travel publisher Lonely Planet, and it dominates online catch-up services. Now, James Murdoch, head honcho at Sky, he gave the BBC a good kicking at this year's Edinburgh TV Festival on Friday, describing its expansion into other parts of the media as chilling. While Dawn Airy, boss of this here Channel 5, suggested one way for the BBC to play fair might be to reduce its size to, say, just 2 TV channels, a handful of radio stations for a much reduced licence fee. It could then offer all its other services, online catch-up, for a small fee, micropayments they call it, as commercial stations are either doing or planning to do in the very near future. Now, like many of you, I am a huge fan of the BBC. I work for them as well, so I have an interest. But I also feel that its critics have a point. The nature of TV is changing, how we watch it is changing as well, so I reckon at some point we can only assume the BBC and how it's funded will have to change too. I'm going to start with you, Todd, as you spent half of your working life, maybe more.
Most of my working life working for the BBC, Grange Hill, Tucker's Luck, EastEnders. I mean, I think it's a fantastic institution. You know, when I was a kid, we could only get 3 channels. It was BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV.
BBC Two didn't start till tea time.
Exactly so. We still had the test card back then with that funny-looking...
Happy days.
Yeah, happy days, happy days. No daytime TV, no. But and I've worked for them. I've been very grateful for the work that I've got from over the years. But I think my point is, and it's come with the politicians with their expenses, and they're all, you know, rushed over to the BBC with their expenses. I think what people are peed off with, should we say, is you know, the creaming off of usually licensed, you know.
Licence fee cash for big parties
and stuff. Big parties and, you know, hairdryers and handbags and all that kind of business, you know. So I think that's what people are mostly peed off with, and I suppose I would too, because I, like you, have to pay my licence fee.
Do you see the point of the commercial broadcasters? You think in the early days, like our youth, when there were 3 channels, ITV had an enormous amount of advertising revenue coming through. It had no rivals. Yeah. How many commercial rivals are there? I mean, hundreds. Yeah. The same amount of money, which is reduced anyway because of recession, being chopped up into ever smaller pieces. That's bad for competition.
Exactly. Well, I think the BBC will, you know, because they don't need to be funded by advertising, they'll go on and on and on, and they'll get bigger. Because of the recession, I think the commercial companies are feeling a little bit left out because there's not as much revenue coming in. I think, you know, but very hard institution to knock down. But at the same time, it is a rather good one.
Stefan, what do you make of? There's quite a lot of criticism about the BBC stepping outside of television and radio into the world of online catch-up services and internet, leading the way, making it very difficult for commercial organisations to compete.
It is a big problem. Although BBC Worldwide is obviously at arm's length from the BBC itself. It's a commercial organisation, puts money back into programmes. Yep. That is a good thing. I've got a solution. Basically, chop the licence fee in half and make it the Stephen Gates channel. BBC Stephen, and I don't really have a problem with that at all. You know,
and if there's any problem, it could just be BBC Gates.
Yeah, also, something's just struck me. I wonder, and there's an amazing thing about why the food culture in Britain has traditionally not been as good as continental Europe. And there's a theory that it's because our TV's so good. People actually stay in and watch telly. Now, if you've ever been to France or Italy and watched a bit of their telly, you kind of think, I'll go and make some food, actually.
Should we go and get something to eat?
And I wonder if part of the problem is that the quality of TV is raised up because of the BBC. And so other programmes like this have to be that much better because there's great stuff being
easier abroad because you're not spending £142.50 on what is a form of tax.
Yep.
And I imagine with the growth of satellite digital channels, there are lots of people out there who rarely watch BBC programmes.
Yeah.
Carol,
Well,
I kind of know what... I think I know what you're going to say.
If Stefan's dishing out the broadcasting fee, the Thatch channel would like a little bit of it.
No, competition already. I've only just started.
I think there are plenty of people, maybe even some in our studio audience here, who would like to be relieved of the obligation to pay the British Broadcasting Corporation £142.50 by way of the licence fee. But if we're going to replant the goalposts, and I read quite a lot of what James Murdoch said in Edinburgh, if we're going to replant the goalposts on the broadcasting pitch, I think it should be done within the context of a comprehensive debate on the future of broadcasting, not some sort of half-baked idea. No, it isn't really fair, so we'll try and divide up the cake a bit differently. It isn't fair. We know that. It's how it is restructured.
OK, and the idea, Dawn Aries' idea that of 2 channels, a handful of... I mean, you wouldn't want to be... I don't think you'd want to be an independent commercial radio station in the current climate, looking at BBC local radio stations getting free puffs on TV all day long. 2 channels, a handful of radio stations and a much-reduced licence fee?
An idea, an idea. You're never going to please all of the people all of the time with this one.
God, tell me about it. I try every day. Try. Let's throw it open to you guys. Is the BBC too powerful? How would you trim it down if you think it is? Kirsty?
Ashley does think they're too powerful, and he's on line 2.
Morning, Ashley.
Morning, guys.
Too powerful how?
Right, I've got a perfect example of power. This wasn't my main point, but up until a few years ago, the BBC used to MOT their own vehicles, which is absolutely crazy, considering that you and I have to go through the stringent process the UK has for that. But the key point for the call was for years they've monopolised the FM radio band. A perfect example, like Radio 2 has its own area of the spectrum, Radio 3 and all the other networks and so on. With the technology that we have today, that is completely unnecessary. Just a small amount of planning would free up probably at least a third of the FM radio band, making way for a lot more variety.
Well, you say that, you know, if the variety is commercially driven, right, there's no money for it. I mean, that's what everyone's saying. There's no money in advertising. Profits are falling for... I mean, income streams are falling. I think quite a lot of media players aren't making any profit at all. So it's not a case of freeing up space for more commercial rivals. It's, in terms of bandwidth, it's about freeing up areas where they can actually generate money. Commercial rivals can generate income. Otherwise, they're all going to go fold.
Well, I absolutely agree. Any service that's to launch has to be commercially viable. But in Brighton, for instance, we've got one local radio station. We've obviously got, like most of the UK has, you know, the commercial networks as well. But you know, every time any of the local radio organisations in Brighton have applied for further licences, the radio authorities have come back and
said there's no room.
You know, there's no more room available, and I can't help thinking. Obviously, it's my own personal view, but when you're scanning around in your car, radio goes Radio 2, and then you scan up Radio 2, scan up Radio 2, and it's just absolutely crazy in this day and age where we've got all of this technology available. I don't know why we're still continuing with
I'm with you. It's changing through digital radio as well, which is worth thinking about. Ashley, thank you. Kirsty?
Mark thinks they're great, and he's on line 1.
Mark, who's great?
I think BBC are extremely good.
Yeah.
I mean, I find it a bit rich that Rupert Murdoch can complain about...
James Murdoch.
James Murdoch and his father as well. But certainly I find it amazing that the Murdochs can complain about the BBC having their finger in too many pies. When you actually look at sort of the broad spectrum that the Murdochs control, it's a little bit rich.
The one difference is, of course, the key difference is you don't have to take out a Sky subscription when you buy a television, but you do have to take out a licence fee.
But the problem is that it's the BBC and its public service broadcasting requirement that actually maintains the standards in this country. Now, a prime example of that would be if you look at other countries, say, such as America, which does not have such a strong public service broadcasting requirement. You get things like Fox News, which is owned by the Murdochs. Yeah. Whereas in this country, Murdoch owns Sky News. Now, Sky News is extremely good. It's one of the best television news stations in the world. And it competes against the BBC. But that's the point. It competes with the BBC, because the BBC has its standards of public service broadcasting, which it maintains, and other companies have to come up to that standard.
OK. Do we need 9 BBC channels? Well, are 2 not enough?
To be perfectly honest, on my own personal belief, I think probably 2 or 3 would be enough. I mean, people watch BBC 4 and 3, and really they were put there to take up the spectrum space on the digital broadcasting bill as the network, so that they have...
OK, I'm sorry to push you, because I'm interested in your thoughts, and there's lots more to say. The online area, I mean, it's no secret to say that there are newspapers out there that run free-to-access websites containing all the news. They, in their heart of hearts, want to charge micropayments, maybe 0.01p each time you look at it, so that they get some income to keep them generating.
Absolutely.
The BBC does all of this for free. It makes it very difficult for commercial rivals to get involved.
Well, one of the problems with the online content service is that sort of Pandora's box has been opened up, and you can't put that genie back in the box now.
That's very true.
Now, the reason that newspapers and magazines are all going on to online, but they don't understand how they should be doing it or why they should be doing it. They just know they ought to be doing it, so it becomes shovelware, and they simply shovel their existing newspaper onto online and give it away for free. Well, that's stupid.
Mark, what do you do for a living?
I'm a university lecturer.
In media studies?
Please, not media studies. That's terrible.
You're very genned up on it all, though, and I think you speak a lot of sense. Thank you very much for the call. Kirsty.
Steve's on line 3.
I just think of all those undergrads who just started their media degree courses now. God bless. Steve, good morning.
Morning, Matthew.
Too powerful, the BBC?
It's along the same lines. I believe that the BBC is far too arrogant. One of the examples is executive salaries and what they pay their top stars. I mean, there were newspaper reports a few months back saying some of their top stars were being paid 20 times that of their nearest commercial rivals. And that's ludicrous. And it's also the way they schedule some of their programming. You often find that they put a similar program up against a commercial channel on at the same time on the same evening. And why do they need to do that? Why are they competing? You know, they're supposed to be providing a service, not splitting the audience or, you know, trying to...
Yeah, do we need 9 BBC channels?
Well, probably not, I suppose. I mean, it does fragment the audience on the other hand. I mean...
Well, I'm just saying, would you rather pay... I mean, it's totally random, but let's say say £70-odd for a licence fee instead of 142, and instead of getting everything you get now, you get BBC One, BBC Two, and let's say 5 national radio stations, forget about the regional ones. Would that be better value?
In terms of TV channels, it probably offers far more choice, but I do agree with your first caller that on the radio spectrum, they're probably taking up a lot of bandwidth that, you know, could be used for, you know, much more niche broadcasters. But I mean,
do you actually flip it around? Instead of having the BBC One and BBC... I'm just throwing some ideas here. BBC One and BBC Two, you actually have the niche channels, because that's what a licence fee is for, is to provide programmes that you wouldn't otherwise
BBC
get.
4, but not BBC One and BBC Two.
CBBC, obviously.
Oh, obviously. CBBC.
But, you know, maybe it's the issue, that why should BBC One be chasing the big ratings? Maybe they should be providing niche. I don't know.
I've always thought that since they've expanded the number of channels, the gaps between the quality programmes on 1 and 2 get wider, and so my suspicion has been if you shut down the newer channels and put that programming back into BBC One and BBC Two, you'd be back where we were 15 years ago with a very strong public service broadcaster. Don't know, just a thought. If anybody from BBC is watching, from Contracts Department, obviously, I didn't mean a word of it. You're wonderful, I love you. If Dawn Airy, my boss, is watching, it's a brilliant idea. We should cut the BBC immediately. I'm glad we've concluded that. After the ads...